All right, how's everybody doing?
Good.
All right, let's get started. He's already doing this.
Do you want the controller?
All right, so tonight obviously we're going to be talking about PHP. How many people here are familiar with PHP? I know there's at least a few. Well, there's a lot more than I expected. Okay, so part of this is probably going to be, I don't know, recursive for you guys. We're just going to be going over some basics to start with, and we're going to get into some applications. I'm going to start off with introducing what PHP is. For instance, PHP, first of all, it's an acronym. It's for PHP Hypertext Preprocessor. I'll get into a little bit of history a little bit later. It actually didn't used to stand for that. It's a scripting language. Like it says out there, you can add dynamic content to your web pages. You can use it full on to enhance, the HTML, so you can do user interaction in a different way. That's data driven. You can use it with databases. You can also use it to. I really don't know where I was going with that. Anyways. Yeah, like I put up here, it's embedded directly into your HTML code. So you use opening tags and closing tags. You build your regular HTML page, and you just throw the PHP in there where you need it and when you need it. It's a server-side scripting language, and for those of you that don't know what that means, there's client-side and server-side, or at least that's the terminology that I'm familiar with. And what that means is you don't have to worry about browsers or operating systems or anything like that. It's all down on your server, so that way you know exactly what's going to come up every time, given that your code is correct, because then no one knows what's going to happen. So it just takes away that headache worrying about, is he on IE6 or is she using Firefox or anything like that, which is really convenient. It's also extremely popular. This little graph here shows, you got time here and the amount of domains and IPs that have been using, and you can see it just grows. I got into PHP sometime in high school, probably in 2002, and I witnessed it. All my friends that I was coding with or were working on projects, high school, college, suddenly everyone I knew was using PHP. And there was, some people like ASP or whatever, but basically PHP is extremely popular. As you can see, we got millions and millions and millions of domains that are running it.
And that's in 2007. So.
Yeah, and that's, I don't know if we can go back. All right. What PHP isn't. It's not a magic bullet. If you have a problem with your website that you're trying to fix, it's not going to be like a Band-Aid. You just slap it on there, take care of everything. It's a tool, you need to use it as such. It's not a hammer, it's like a precision surgical knife. You don't need to use it all the time. It's not necessary for every application. Some people try to overuse it, once you get stoked about something like, well, how can I use this because I like it? It's just like everything you get really excited about. You need to use it when you need to use it, because overusing it is going to make bulky code. It's going to drain a little bit on your server, running all that stuff all the time. Pure awesome, bottled for your enjoyment after 1 year conditioning. Yeah, it's definitely that. So yeah, let's move on here. So sounds great. It is. What do you need to get this going? Well, it needs to be installed and enabled on your server. Like I said, it's a server-side language. So if it's not installed, the server doesn't know what to do with any file that's terminated in .php. So you've got your .html files, you got .js, .css, whatever. And in .php, you can have index.php. You don't even need to worry about it. That's going to be your home page. I think Marky's going to touch a little bit later on some more configuration stuff. One of the biggest boons of PHP, at least in my book, especially versus something that's like ASP, is it's open source and it's free. A lot of companies, a lot of individuals have been working on this project for a long time. You can download it and install it if it's not already installed on your server. Most of the time, it's going to come in already installed on your server. Every server that I've used since I started doing web development has already had it on there, and it's been configured. Again, we'll touch on a little bit of configuration later. It's pretty easy, or you can make it as complex as you want. Configuration. Basically, like I said, you need to make sure that it's configured and installed correctly, so it'll handle all the .php files. I think I kind of jumped the gun on that bullet point there, but like I said, just keep that in the back of your mind, because we're going to come back. We're going to check that out later in a little bit more detail. Same stuff. There we go. Hey. Yeah, there we go. I already did all those. That's fantastic. What do you need? Yeah, dashing good looks and a debonair attitude. You need to be able to get away with this kind of shenanigans.
I got a question. What's up with the pictures?
See, actually, I'll touch on that. I'd like to thank you for noting that I had the cute kitty idea from before, and it's Halloween, so we went for the zombie of the cute kitty thing. It goes on another tangent later, so hold tight, but thank you for catching that.
All right, now let's get on past some of the bad humor. PHP was originally a set of Perl scripts. It used to be called personal homepage. That's what PHP originally stood for. It was developed by pretty much a project by one guy. I think he's Ukrainian. I don't remember exactly, but just to help enhance the functionality of his pages. You know, get some data-driven information on there, so it could be a little more user interactive. Flash, 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 flash. We'll take a look at it later, but keep in the back of your mind, it looks like Perl. I mean, so it's personal homepage. It's originally a set of Perl scripts. That's why it largely looks the way it does. It's going to be familiar to anyone that's familiar with, you know, programming Perl and CGI and things of that nature. And there we go, out of order again. Personal homepage tools. PHP tools was actually the full name. It wasn't known as PHP until they made it that recursive acronym later, which is PHP Hypertext Preprocessor. Right now we're up to version 5.33. I remember when I started way back in the day, uphill both ways. It was PHP 4 just came out, and that was a big new thing. I don't know, we're already excited. There's some pretty major changes, and now they're up to 5.3. So let's just dive right in. The ubiquitous hello world. Got some just super basic HTML up here. You know, I think everyone's familiar with what this looks like. And here it is. You know, like I said, you need to make sure you're opening your PHP. It's embedded right into your HTML. These are your opening and closing tags, and it looks just like a regular scripting language. Echo, I'll touch on this later, just prints to the screen. So hello world, it print a blank white HTML page because there's no formatting in there. It just say in Times New Roman or whatever your default text would be, or font, excuse me. Hello world, that's French for hello world. So what just happened in there? All right. Like I said, PHP is embedded directly into your HTML. Maybe this is working again. So you build just a regular HTML page, and then you enhance it where and when you need. You can have multiple instances of PHP on the page. You don't necessarily have to. Or you can just make a whole page pure PHP code that generates the HTML with the dynamic content already inside of it. Like those tags I pointed out earlier, you're going to begin editing in PHP mode with the caret, or the... Yeah, the less than sign. Question mark PHP, or you can simply leave it as just a question mark. Both work. And you close it pretty much exact opposite way. You don't need to worry about PHP at this point. So what's Echo? Echo is one of the two main functions that you can use to basically output text. Anything that you've used to format. So Echo, or like I say, more simply prints to the screen. And here we're just using it real quick. Actually, I think Marky added that one. I don't know.
Echo bar, yeah. Actually, let me talk about that real quick. So there are two modes in the how you open it. You have the regular tag mode, and then you have the short tag mode. Benefits of the short tag mode is that you can use this little shortcut to make it actually echo, where the equal sign becomes an alias to echo, and then that way you can print things out very easily. The problem with that is if you don't have control of your server, a lot of servers don't enable short tag mode. So if you're trying to run a program and you have the short tag openings and it's not working, odds are that it's not going to, it's just not configured for that. And we'll touch on how to change that dynamically. But then you're going to have to kick out to long tag mode or standard mode, and then the equal is no longer aliased out there. So I thought I'd throw that in there.
And the rest is magic. Now the rest is just basic HTML. You already know everything about that. One thing I'd like to touch on why I like PHP so much and why I kind of got into it in the beginning. Actually, I don't know how or when I discovered it other than sometime around high school, but the learning curve on this language is fantastic. I mean, if you're familiar with any kind of basic programming concepts, you know, you can do loops, if clauses, basic functions and variables, then you're going to be at home immediately. It's really logically laid out whenever you build your code, and you can do as much or as little as you want. And we're going to talk on some of the applications and platforms that run on PHP later. I mean, you don't have to build a whole ridiculous code with a bunch of databases or anything like that if you don't want to. If you're running your site with WordPress, you can just dive in because that's built with PHP. Maybe you just want to tweak something. That's something that's easy to do once you're familiar with the language. All right, so let's take a look at a little bit more in-depth stuff here. Functions, these are your basic building blocks, just like in most languages. You can create your own, or you can use built-in functions. There's lots and lots and lots. In fact, there's so many that you will probably never use almost all of them. I've managed to create functions that were already a real thing, trying to make up my own function, and it's definitely not going to let you allow to do that. But echo, print, things like that, those are your built-in functions. If you want to create your own, again, this is going to look really familiar. You just call it function, and then you give it a name that you want to. And this is optional. You can pass an argument into the function. That way, when you're calling it, you'll just put in whatever it's going to be. And you can use it inside the function at that point. And then whatever you want to put in for the code to execute just goes right inside. Use your curly brackets. And then all you need to do when you're using it, and once it's built, you just call your function just using the name, and if you want to put in your arguments, you can. And the variables, they're super easy. You just need the $, variable name, and the semicolon. Semicolon needs to terminate pretty much every line where you're not opening or closing a function or an if or a while or a loop or anything like that. But yeah, you can just, like I said, for functions, you've got built-in function names, you've got built-in variable names too. Careful not to tread on those or it'll freak out, but for the most part, it's pretty foolproof. So let's see how you're going to get some of this data from your user. Forms are a really quick and easy way. You get some info. So basic form on here. What we're looking at, you need to give your form a name. The action is what's going to happen when the user clicks submit or OK or they hit enter. So you can name your script.php, whatever it is. That's going to handle all the requests and everything once it goes. And method is important in this case because it determines how you're going to go and get your variables and the data that are contained in them. You can use post or you can use get. And then you've got your regular inputs. This is basic, user ID and password. Or just say something like login. I mean, there's really no labeling on here. It's just super basic. And then these, calm down. These are going to be, this is useful because whatever you put in the name attribute, that's going to be your variable name. So that way you can just call it like that, user ID or password. Or, this is actually something that Marky corrected me on. I was unaware of this, that you need to use a super variable. You can use request, which would be just generic post or get, or you can use post or get specifically. Or you can use your mom. That's a popular one. Use your mom.
Because she's super.
She's super. She's super variable.
That's not a real variable.
No, don't use mom. So those are basically, arrays. So all the ones that are going to be passed in the HTTP request are going to be in that array, and you can just use basic square brackets, not your curly brackets, to access that name. So it would say something like request user ID. We didn't actually have anything put up here, but... All right, so now we've got some basics. I'm going to show you some crazy stuff.
Oh, I never corrected that. Crap.
Oh no, okay. So these weird things, the W's, whatever, those are backslashes, and I'll go into those a little bit more later. Something got lost in translation. So this is a basic PHP file here, some basic code. So I'm declaring a function up here, default, and this is just a fancy way I use to automatically pop into some modes using the URL. You don't need to worry about this. I'll get into that later.
This is a server-side code, right?
This is server-side code, yes. So what we've got is basically a directory handling function. Let's say I want to show the user some, let's open up a directory and list all the files and make it look nice. We don't want to just spit out one long line, which it'll do if you don't format it. So we're using this and we're creating the HTML with it. So you can see we're going to open the directory. Some of these function names are pretty easy to do. And the directory up here, we can get more into that later if you guys have some questions. Basically, if you ever opened up your FTP and you see the directory listing, there's a dot, double dots, and then everything. The double dots are up one, if I remember correctly, and dot is where you are currently. So we're opening up the current directory that we're in, and you have to give it a handle. That's just the variables. And if it can do that, then it'll do this. Because if it can't open the directory, there's no use continuing. We'll just stop. We're going to show available directories, and this is where the W's come into play. Those are \n and \t, which basically gives you a new line and then puts it in a tab, because this is going to output HTML, and then the HTML itself gets interpreted by the browser. And again, I don't want my HTML to be one really long line. I like to have it all spaced out, nice and tabbed like this. So that's what I'm doing there. So at that point, we're going to say available directories, and then while is a basic loop. It's going to loop through while everything in here is true. And basically, we're going to do the same thing again. While it is true, this is false, it's not false. We're going to go ahead and read through the directory, and then echo with some basic HTML. Everything that's going to be in there. And then here we're adding the file name. You guys lost yet? No? Alright, very good. Just a bulleted list. I open it up with the UL. Where did I put the UL? Right there. And then the line item, line item, line item. At that point, once I'm done, because it'll stop, we're going to echo it to close the unordered list. Then we're going to close the handle, or the handle for the directory. It's really important to open and close them because you get like really crazy unused and loose end in terms of resources and server things like that. So, just it's good concepts, good basics to make sure that you're always opening and closing. You'll touch on this a little bit later with MySQL, doing the same thing with databases. It's very similar. So I'm just going to show you, that's a really complicated function, basically, unless you're familiar with it. And you can just do something as simple as print crap, and then this is something else. That's all you need to do. You just call print crap at that point, and it's going to print out on the page that this is something else. Basic if structure here, and here's where I'm referring to the HTTP request variable, so get, and there's your brackets. Act is the name that I've chosen for this variable for the action. And then we're using eval, which is pretty cool. It allows me to do this. Basically, you notice I put these underlines right in front of both these functions. We're going to take this, we're going to eval this whole statement. What it's going to do is put all that together and then call that whatever it is in there. Is that a good description of eval? It's a bit complicated. I didn't understand it for a long time, but when you get it, it's really, really useful. Just like most of PHP. Else, we're going to call the basic function. So if we don't have anything specifically, let's say I wanted to get print crap and not list everything in the directory, I would just call it specifically. All right, everyone all right out there?
Oh yeah, you're supposed to explain that.
Oh yeah. I'm good with the order tonight. Baby, let me explain. All right, let's move on. Maybe. There we go. And here we're going to make the bridge into some more complicated things.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about functions. And where are we? Nope, we're dead. All right, cool. So we're going to talk about some classes. Classes are the objects that you can create yourself in a PHP world. This makes it very easy to create repetitive models for yourself and use them over and over again. So you don't have to recreate a function on top of a function on top of a function. You can create the class once and then call that class a second time. It contains both the variables and methods inside of it, like a getter or a setter, so you can actually call a constant or a part of that class or a property of that class, and then create methods to get or set or do whatever you need to within that class itself. You can also make them private or public, whereas if you create a class and you want to create a class called car, and you want that color of that car to be known to everybody, you can make that a public variable, or you can make it private, where you have to actually use a method to go get that information out of the class as well. Here's a sample class. We got a class called food that we open up. We're going to create a public, thank you, somebody got that, I love that. Foo Fighters equals good. So we're going to create a property of it called Fighters, and we're going to set that as good right away. We're going to create a private variable of Nirvana, which is dead, sadly. And then we're going to go ahead and create a method to bring breath into whatever. We create the method, name it public so that everybody can get it once they create the class of food. And then we're going to set Nirvana to alive. So if we ever want to bring back Kurt Cobain, that's how you would do it. And then you close off that class, and then when you want to create that class, you would just do a new foo, and that would create that class for you. 2, and I am a zombie. So then we're going to talk about database connectables, because a lot of websites, a lot of platforms out there, you need to talk to a database to store your information. Back when I started programming, we used flat files, which used a lot of what Peter was talking about when we opened up the file and printed stuff out and wrote to the file, and it hurt to do that because it was so slow. And then I forgot the name of the file and then erased it. God. All these different things that you can do with Keynote, and it just slows the whole thing down. Anyway, so PHP supports pretty much every common database out there: Oracle, MySQL, SQL Server, Sybase, Postgres. Is that how you pronounce it? I can never remember how to pronounce it. Postgres? Sure. all sorts of databases. Of course, the one that you usually use is MySQL because it's installed everywhere and not Zoom. All right, first it connects to the database. This is the process that you want to do. You want it to connect to the database. Second, it makes its SQL query to the in whatever flavor you're writing it in. Third, it puts the lotion in the bucket. Wait. I mean, the result set of information is returned. Oh, what happened there? There we go. So, for an example, have someone tell me they know who this guy is.
He's the commissioner on Mars.
Oh, thank you. It's Buffalo Bill from the previous statement. Come on, people. All right, so here's an example. We got the MySQL Connect. I'm pointing at my screen like you can see what I'm doing. You connect to your SQL database, calling whatever host it's served on, so you can actually call remote databases, not just your local database, although it's smart to use your own local host. That way it's less hackable. With your username and the password. And then you create your query. Select all from sewing plants. And then you create your bucket, which is actually returns all that information from that SQL call. And then, once again, you close your connection on there, which is, of course, good to do because you definitely don't want to leave any processes open, because then your server will lag because all this stuff is hanging out in its memory, and then it will fail miserably. And then you take the resource, once you've taken that resource, and then you use it by flipping it, going through each of the results set for each of the bucket array. You return it in. You turn the information into an array so that you can write it out properly. You echo, and you notice I don't use the bracket lines because there are a lot of functions in PHP that you don't need to use the braces in there. They're called common functions. Most of your generated functions you're going to want to use the brackets. Basically, if it's returning something simple like a string, that's where you're going to not need to use the brackets. And then you end the while. Now, you can use your loops in two different routes. One, you can use little curly braces at the end of it and then to close it. Or you can use this notation where you put the colon at the end of your statement, and then when you're closing your loop, end your loop. I personally use that more often because that way I know exactly where I am, and then I can note after it very easily. Both ways are very simple to do, and it's, choose your flavor again. You can also make objects out of each row. Instead of using the MySQL fetch array, you can MySQL fetch result, and that returns an object. And then instead of using the array notation, you would use the object notation, which I didn't write down. So, next I want to talk about some platforms, PHP platforms, because yes, I am a broken record. I like talking about platforms and libraries. Pretty much everyone, if you've seen multiple ones with me, then that's what I've talked about. There are many out there, a lot of platforms for PHP. The most common one, or the original one, is the Zend framework, and it's actually created by the same guy who created PHP. So a lot of people really got behind the Zend framework, and I hate it. There's also CachePHP, which is a really good model view controller implementation out there. They do a great job of that, and it's actually spawned a lot of other great little libraries or platforms out there. Much like CodeIgniter was actually an offshoot of CachePHP, and they did it a lot better. And there are just tons more. The one that I like the most is CodeIgniter, because it's the one that I've been using. Well, it's now the one that I've been using the most because I like the way that it works so much more. One, their documentation, the way that they set up their library or their platform is very superior to all the other documentation out there. If you try to find a function in the Zend framework, you're going to cry because it's so difficult to find. The way that CodeIgniter, the guys at Ellis Labs, did their documentation just was great. didn't know another way to say that. The way that they do their models is the best way. You don't have to conform your data to the way they want to. A lot of platforms out there, you have to write your database in a specific format in order for it to work. Cake PHP was the first one that I ran into that. And once I had a left join in Cake PHP, it just completely threw everything apart. So I left, and he made fun of it. And then, of course, it's full model view controller, which means your model information is separate from your controller, which is separate from your view. And that way, if you ever have to change anything in your model, all you have to do is update one file instead of having going to all of them to make those changes. Also, they have the best PHP best practices documentation out there that I've seen. And what I mean by best practices, and you can see the URL for it there, is that the way that you want to write, if you're writing with a bunch of other open source developers, the thing about Drupal or CodeIgniter is that you're going to be using this with other people who are using the same library. And you want to write the code the same way so that everybody can hop into there and edit it without having to say, oh, you know, what's this function called? They have a naming convention for all the way the functions are. Whether or not you want to use short tags or not, and that was one of the reasons I brought that up before, is because if you use short tags on something that you're going to share with the world, you have no way to guarantee that that short tag is going to be readable by whatever server it's installed on there, which is why you really want to use that $PHP, unless you know that you're going to have full control. Like on my own personal sites, I use short tags because I like the little echo thing, but when I'm writing stuff like modules and whatnot, you want to be able to share that out with the world and make sure that you have, that the world can use it. Otherwise, they'll load up your file, it won't work, and they'll laugh at you publicly. Touching on configuration, there are 3 different ways that you can change your configuration. I'm going to hop out of the slideshow real quick and show you what the information looks like. When you run the PHP info, you get all this information as to what's going on, but it also allows you to take a look at what kind of tags are out there. Like, you know, we can use the ASP tags right there, or you're going to have the short tags, short open tags, which is that one setting, whether or not that's turned on or off. And that's a simple page that you can create by calling a function called PHP info. A lot of people do this. It doesn't really give any detrimental stuff. It doesn't show any passwords or stuff like that. So a lot of websites have this information out there available. Usually it's on a page called phpinfo.php, and that's all that's on that page. This one's actually on my server at home, which shows you all the information on that server as to what's going on. It also lets you know what kind of modules are running in the background, whether or not you can use the date functionality. And these are all components of PHP that you can install, enable, disable, and whatnot. There are a couple ways that you can do that. You can make these modifications. The first is the PHP INI file, which is part of the server file. Now, if you are doing any remote hosting, you're not going to have access to that file because that is part of the web server itself. You can also change it in the http.config file, which is, again, if you're hosting remotely, you're not going to be able to find that file most of the time. The next thing you can change, you can actually make those modifications in your htaccess file. So if you're on a web server and you know you're going to be wanting the short tags, or more often than not, if you want your upload, how large of files you can upload it using PHP, you can actually change that size in your htaccess file, or there's a function for that called ini.set, and then you can decide what you want to change it, and you can change the range of whatever you want. So you can completely configure it many different ways to make that, to bend it to your will, so to speak. And actually, more importantly, you're bending the server to the will. So no matter how far they lock down your PHP on the server side, you can always open it up on those 3 methods. Don't do anything that breaks the server. And that's the end. This is the most scary picture I could find. That's about all for us. Were there any questions about the servers or anything that you wanted to talk about? The end. We got a lot of time. Come on, someone talk to me for crying out loud.
PHP instead of Python or something?
There's a larger group of. Let me step back on that. There are a lot more servers. It's more commonly installed on most of your web servers out there. On every Mac, PHP automatically is installed and running. Most servers have to do an extra step to install Python. Also, the community of PHP is a lot larger, so if you're looking to learn PHP, you have that accessibility. It's like why you want to use something like Drupal as opposed, or WordPress, as opposed to trying to write your own sites or use some little offshoot, because the group out there is a lot easier to get to you. Python's a great language. I've got no problems with Python, but PHP is out there more readily. So.
What do you recommend for a server on my local desktop so I can test my own PHP programs without going off the website? Can you repeat the question?
The question is, what do I recommend? Oh, is that what your hand was up for, his question? Okay, his question over there, and I'm pointing to the video because you can see who he is why would I use PHP over Python? End of that question. That question over here is, what would I recommend as a server on the local desktop? Like I said, on Macs, it comes with Apache installed, PHP installed, MySQL installed. You don't have to worry about that. For Windows, there's a thing called XAMPP, which actually will load those three things for you as well, which does, the HTTP, and then MySQL, and then PHP, and something else that I don't remember. OSSH, no, FTP. So you can actually make your site, if you're using Windows, at 7 or whatever.
I just like to write my code on my
Right,
PC.
absolutely did, and that's what, one of the reasons that I got into Macs is because it was a development server right away, and then I'd break it, and then someone else would have to fix it for me.
Which Windows version is XAMPP on?
XAMPP is on. Actually, it's available for Linux. It's actually there's a port out there for Mac. Windows 7 XP. I've installed it on 2000. That way you don't have to worry about. And the thing about that is it's easier to use something like XAMPP, or even installing HTTPD and PHP directly. It's easier to do that than trying to reconfigure it to what's the Windows Server software? I'm glad I forgot that, to be honest with you kids. So yeah, PHP on IIS is a slow drudge, a slog of a thing to do, and MySQL even more so. But SQL Server works great on it, I guess.
If you're working with a database and you're trying to learn it, would you recommend starting with the framework Webuquerque and learning that and getting an idea behind that, or just starting from the base level?
So he's asking if I wanted to start, working with a database or actually learning PHP, would I want to start with a framework or just learn straight PHP? And the answer to that is know your tools before knowing the expert tools. And whereas CodeIgniter makes writing your PHP easy, you still need to have a good grip of the PHP on the onset. Knowing how to connect to a database, it makes it certainly easy, but you want to make sure that you're getting the correct result set and why that's coming about. So I do recommend going through PHP raw first before trying to go into a platform, personally.
So I had a question. I'm sure Mark can answer this, but Peter might be the better person to. If you're just, picking up PHP, are there some good resources online that you found useful as you were learning this stuff on your own?
I'm going to let Peter answer.
All right, question was, if you're starting to learn PHP, you're interested in it, good resources online or otherwise. I've always been a fan of a couple different places. Mainly I use, this is a plug for, I guess, my friend Chris, dreamandcode.net. It was full of really helpful people. It's free. It's global. There's people up all times of the night, so you can post something in the PHP forum and pretty much immediately with the size of the site now, get some feedback, which is infinitely useful, and they will knock you down and say, you're doing this wrong. What's wrong with you? But
They will knock you down if you're doing that stupid.
oh yeah.
Just wrong.
Yeah. Other than that, the one that I use more than anything when I was learning it's a book just simply called PHP 4. I don't remember the authors, there's like 7 of them, but it's literally a book this thick. Yeah, like that, but bigger and scarier, and like probably less easy to read than that. From what I've seen lately, coding and scripting books have come a long way in terms of user friendliness, but What I do is I like to jump right in. I check things out, and there's great resources even on php.net. They go through examples, and there's comments below where people post, yeah, that's the way you can do it. Here's how I do it. Here's how I optimized it. And I use the big PHP 4 book as kind of like my PHP Bible. Like I could look up something. How do I do this? What am I doing wrong? Flip, 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 flip. I didn't sit there and read 900 pages of PHP.
I would definitely recommend CNM's distance learning online course. It's really good for making you do projects with PHP. They're real good and they help you out.
And to plug myself, I'm teaching the UNM Continuing Education course starting in the spring for PHP. So there's that. I threw up a couple other ones. W3 Schools is actually what started me, and so it's been around a very long time. So JavaScript, PHP, pretty much web, any web.
I will choke you if you ever suggest W3 Schools for JavaScript again. It's horribly outdated.
Okay, I haven't looked at it in a long time. I said this is where I started. Okay,
No, not
so
even for starting. It's
Brian
a horrible resource.
Arnold has threatened my life again.
If you're interested in better resources for that, promotejs.com.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's it. What was that again?
Promotejs.
Promotejs.com. They're a lot more better. We're not talking JavaScript.
I know.
I know
you
you want to
said
talk. I know.
You brought it up, and you know.
The Dreaming Code forums. If you have problems trying to find out something, don't come in there and say I need to make a web page. That's when you're going to get berated. You want to have a specific problem with Dreaming Code. Show the code. Show what you want to do. What you're trying to do. One of the biggest phrases in Dreaming Code is "We're not going to do your homework for you," which is basically, it's a resource if you're running into a wall at that point. There are a lot of great people out there that do that. One second. This is the PHP site itself, php.net. This is the source right there. What? 5.3.3.A7, I think. But yeah, I mean, actually, I may have copied that and changed the names to protect the innocent. But this is, I mean, I go to this site all the time. If I'm trying to, for the life of me, can never remember the syntax for the date object. Constantly running there and finding out what it is. If you're ever going to have a problem, it's going to be right there.
Wait, that's the place to search for a date?
Yes. Yeah, not Match.com. Yes, online dating is all done at php.net. And I'm going to introduce you to a sad, lonely life. Yeah. The style guide that I was talking to you at Code Igniters, if you go to their user guide, this has a lot of best practices as far as writing your code to share with other people. Now, if you're just doing your own site, documentation is up to you. But if you're going to do something that you're going to share with other programmers, please, for the love of God, follow some kind of best practices. The naming conventions, how they talk about file format because it's how their program expects the file to be named. That's not so much key. However, it's not a bad thing to get into. If you're calling a class something, call your file the name of the class. Don't call your class foo and then name it, Dave, because you may get that, but not everybody else will. Commenting and all that other stuff. It goes through all sorts of great best practices as well, and that's brought on by them. That's for later. Stop.
Someone asked Peter a question. Quick.
Well, no, I just wanted to... One of the things that I found with PHP is that you get a lot of bang for your buck once you get over the initial...
Infinitely, it's free.
It's free. Once it's everywhere. Once you get over the push of getting the syntax right, getting the database right, getting stuff in, pulling stuff out, you get a lot of bang for your buck. But at that point, that's the point where it's really important to start looking at best practices. Because as you start writing more code, your code goes from here to here to here and here and here
you basically have no HTML
here. That's when you start getting yourself shot. And when someone else has to take over your code, so if somebody's paid you good money to have you write code, and then they have to look at your code, people have been known to lose jobs because other people have looked at their code and said, what do you think of this guy's stuff? And he learned how to do PHP, and he started to do a lot of PHP, but when someone else had to take it over, it took them almost twice as long to fix it as it did to even write it sometimes.
I've lived several horror stories like that. Basically, there was a lot of good information there for the camera. How you doing? Yeah, like jumping in someone else's code. I've had projects before that you come in and you just have no idea what's going on, best practices. I would argue that you may even want to start doing best practices from the beginning. That way it's a habit, not something you need to break. But it's, yeah, I mean, for the love of God and for everyone else that you're going to be ever working with ever, do that.
I've got two things. First, yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I've not hired people because I've reviewed some of the code they've written other places, and they haven't adhered to best practices. It's like, I don't need spaghetti code in my company. I need something that I can put anybody on it, and they can pretty quickly understand what's going on. So I would second what you're saying there. Second thing is a question for some of us old Perl guys who've been around since the Pink Pearl Campbell book. Is there any kind of a PHP for Perl, junkies, training area, something like that?
So the question is, Perl, is there some kind of way to cross over from Perl to PHP? And other than the syntax, no, not really. Because it's not Perl. And when I started with PHP, someone, I'd been writing Perl scripts, and then I needed to do it on a web server, and they didn't want me to use the CGI, they wanted me to use something else. So they said, well, Perl, go play with PHP. And once I got into it, I was like, this is nothing like it, but it's the same, it's kind of the same style. It starts with a P. Outside of that, it's really its own thing. Brian? Wait.
It's a backwards.
You're welcome.
It's a little bit reversed, but Perl has really good documentation for people coming from other languages. So go look at the PHP patches that'll tell you some of the major differences.
Like the platforms that you talked about, Gig and CodeIgniter, I've heard about them before, but I don't know really what's the benefit of using like CodeIgniter or something like that. Like, how does it help the PHP coder?
So the benefit of a platform is always so you can get a site up running quickly. Very simple site or complex sites, you can actually get those out there as proof of concepts out there rather quickly. And so you can actually bid on it. Someone can say to you, hey, I need this site that kind of does this. Here's my data model. Make a website. And you can use something called scaffolding, which just takes that data model and burps it out onto a website. And then you can stylize it because since it's using the model view controller, the view is model controller view. The view, I always get those mixed up. The view is completely separate from the data, from the way that you're controlling it. So you can just concentrate on that view and get that taken care of without having to worry about all this other stuff. It's just a quick way to ramp up a site. That's a lot of people are using Drupal or WordPress, or CMSs, which they're all based on a platform. Expression Engine is based on the CodeIgniter platform. So it's kind of that in that kind of vein. Once you learn the language, you can use this to quickly massage a preset site into exactly what you want it to do. So that's pretty much why you'd want to use a platform. But like I said earlier, get to know the language before you go to bed with its sister. Wait. Sometimes the rum starts early, so. Oh, but then I get really funny. Anything else? Brian, did you have something else you were going to say?
Well, just talking about best practices, one thing that I think is important to mention alongside of that is just comment your stuff. And this doesn't matter what language you're writing in, what you're doing, comment your code. Not for yourself, but for the moron who has to maintain it in 6 months, which may be you. So,
most of the time it is.
And actually, I say that because I'm usually that moron on myself. Because I wrote something, I'll write something and then I'll have to go back to it a couple weeks later. And it'll be, we talked about spaghetti code, and I'm like a pasta salad with code. It's just horrible what I write, and I sit there and I look at it and I'm like, seriously, what was I thinking? And then it makes sense, and then I think, seriously, how did that make sense? But eventually it does, and then you get it. But, if you comment, make comments for yourself, which will help somebody else. But, commenting, and this goes across the board completely.
Does that affect the speed, though? Like CSS, you say you want to get rid of all the comments and condense it. What about the speed of the web service?
Not necessarily, because you're not having to transmit that across the wire, and that's the reason why you want to cut out everything on CSS and make your HTML as terse as possible. With server-side script, you're not having to push that back. Your computer and computers have gotten so fast nowadays that they can run a couple thousand lines of code really, really quickly. But then it's what you're pushing back across the line. One thing that Peter mentioned is that you embed PHP into your HTML, and I actually take a different approach to it. Is that PHP creates your HTML and then spits it back out. But you can read it as it's an HTML file with PHP embedded, or you can think of it as the HTML file is one big echo statement, and then the PHP is inside of it. Exactly. One more question? That was it, though.
I heard something about one of the main PHP, I don't know if he's a founder or just the main person that ran the project, like before PHP 5.
Larry.
Larry.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a Perl guy that helped with. Yeah, he helped with the PHP, the creation of PHP, but he didn't like the way it was going, and yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious what information you had about it.
Nah, I don't have it. I know his name's Larry.
Well, the Twitter person wants to.
Yeah. By the way, the Justin Bieber, there was an argument between me and my wife between promoting Justin Bieber as the worst thing or the Kardashians. You think so? Yeah. Either or, they all suck. And I was actually trying not to promote them, so it didn't work. Bieber.
Making sure I'm understanding the best practices. How much should more code live on the server side than in the HTML, or is it just personal preference? PHP on the server side generates HTML.
Well, so everything resides on the server, whether it's your HTML file or your PHP. That's all going to be on the server. It's what you transmit out to the client that matters. So think of it as you have this big river, and you're trying to get the water as quickly as possible to the town. You can have as much water in the river as possible, but there's only so much pipe that you got going to the town, so you need to think about the quality of the water that's going there. I made that up just now, so and now I have to pee. So
I think that's a good note to end.
And scene.
Thank you very much, Mark and Peter.